Hi YouTube. So it's been a while since I've made any videos, mostly because I'm very busy with my life, of course, as most people are. So one thing I wanted to address was in the realm of the occulted history and Tartaria discussion, some of the most common problems I've run into in discussing these themes with people. The first one, I would say, one of the biggest problems in trying to, I don't know, like, collect evidence with people and stuff like that is that there seems to be an element of fantasy that goes into a lot of the, I guess, mainstream ideas about what people are calling Tartaria, which, by the way, it doesn't really seem, I can't really find any evidence that if whatever this thing was that they ever were calling themselves that, but this is what it's become known as. So but there's an element of fantasy involved, I think, for a lot of these people, because if you, I noticed that if a lot of them, if you say something like, well, dude, you know, there's pretty good evidence that the pyramids were built like 200 years ago. They're like, no, because the pyramids are hundreds of millions of years old, and they're energy centers, and liquid mercury, and free energy, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, well, where, like, if there was any really, like, physical evidence for any of that shit, it might be one thing, but what the physical evidence points to is that they were built with slave labor, like in the 1800s, and a lot of the people that live in Egypt know that because it was their grandparents and great-grandparents and stuff. So that's just an example, but there's a lot of fantasy that seems to be, or a desire for just like this really grand story. Like maybe these people watch Game of Thrones. Maybe they watch, I mean, I don't know. But it seems that a lot of what my research has been pointing to is a lot more boring. It's not boring. It's really fascinating to me. But to people who want stories of, they want these cathedrals to be free energy things. They want, I mean, and I'm not saying like this stuff didn't exist. I'm just saying it doesn't seem to be the important part of the story at all. Here's the other part. A lot of what I've been researching into, you know, a lot of it has to do with the Quran, and I guess you would say Islamic stuff. But another problem I've run into is that obviously, Muslims in the mainstream like contemporary Islam, they do not take very kindly to questioning the official Islamic history. And the main reason I question it is because it backs up the fake timeline. So, for example, if they're going to tell us that the Quran or the Prophet lived 1,500 years ago, or it was written 1,500 years ago, and yet we're also saying that Jesus, Isa, was alive 1,000 years ago, that doesn't make sense to me, because they're talking about it in past tense. They're not saying, you know, and it's just, there's all kinds of stuff. So, I believe what is written in the Quran, but what is actually written in the Quran about the life of the Prophet? Hardly anything that I can tell, and I'm not finished yet. I read the Quran very slowly. I've been chewing on it for over a year. I'm still not to the end, because I think reading it slowly is the best way. That's my opinion. But I'm most of the way through. But so far, there doesn't seem to be much of anything written about the prophet himself. It says it's narrated to the prophet, or to a prophet, but it's narrated to the prophet. But it says that after Esau would come someone named Ahmad, right? And David Ewing Jr. has a whole thing about this. And by the way, I mention him a lot. I don't want to make it seem like he's the authority on any of these topics, but he is one of the only people that is asking some of these questions that other people don't want to ask, and acknowledging parts that other people don't want to acknowledge. Because let's be honest, there is sort of a global trend against anything Islamic. So like, if I tell people, oh yeah, there was a worldwide something, blah blah blah, oh, and their holy book was the Quran, they don't, and like, I don't even know any of this shit for sure. I'm still studying, and I'm not trying to pose like any of this stuff as like absolute fact. What I really want you to do is to start asking questions for yourself. But the problems are, number one, there's a lot of fantasy. People want the stories to be fantastic. They want it to be, they want to hear about fucking giants and dragons and stuff like that. They want to hear about free energy. They want to hear about everything else. They don't want to hear about the Quran. And then also, contemporary Islam, they do not want to hear you question the timeline that is outlined in official history, official Islamic history. So am I saying Islamic history is fake? I'm saying that there's enough of a reason to call it into question. I don't think that they have totally faked anything. I think everything has some part of something in it, because mostly because it's like people remember. Yeah, but it is a big problem that you can't really call any of this stuff into question, because what they'll tell you is, oh, well, we have a great system of record keeping. We have this unbroken lineage, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that doesn't really mean anything to me. You know what I mean? So, and it's one reason I'm hesitant to call myself Muslim, because I don't, there's certain things I'm like learning that make it hard to be like, well, to say like, oh, these people, I'm with them. But I believe that the Quran is the penultimate holy scripture. I'll put it that way. I believe what's written in it, and I believe that it was essentially narrated at least by an angel. You know, so is it like, was it words that came out of God's mouth? Basically, yeah. So that's just my opinion. The Quran as a historical document is a different thing. So that's about all I wanted to say with that. There's a lot of stuff I've planned. A lot of videos will be coming soon. And some of y'all might think this is corny, but I'm gonna try to get into like the AI illustrations, just for like illustrations in the video, to give you like visual aids as to like what I'm talking about. Because I can draw and paint, but I don't have time to do that much. So that'll all be coming soon. But I want to encourage anybody that's into this Tartaria mud flood bullshit, just to try to divorce yourself from the fantasy of it, because it's not, we're not talking about fantasy. We're talking about history that was covered up, and things we were lied to about, and the things that we can physically see that we were lied to about, most of it doesn't have anything to do with what y'all are talking about. Okay? And we're going to talk about, in the next video, it's going to be about the Romans, and like, who were the Romans, or I guess you could say, who were the Tartarians. And that'll be the next one. I have a bunch of stuff planned, but it'll take a while, so if you are interested at all, just stay tuned.